One of the key ones is access to low interest finance, and more now it's actually can be more cost effective to do Homestar. It can be more financially beneficial over. I wouldn't even say a long term. It certainly is over long term, but we're talking in some instances payback periods of less than 3 years or around about 3 years, depending on where you are in the country and what rating you go for. And that's because, as we mentioned, first and foremost, you're going to get a better performing home.
Welcome to the Smart Living Spaces podcast, where we talk about building comfortable, healthy, affordable homes for everyday people. It's architectural design with people and planet in mind. Building for the future, not just for today. Hi everyone, it's Sharon from Smart Living Spaces and welcome to this little podcast episode. And today I'm speaking with Matthew Cutler from the New Zealand Green Building Council, and we're talking Homestar. So if you are an architectural designer, architect, builder, and even a developer, and you want to know about what this Homestar thing is, you're completely in the right place. And if you're a homeowner that wants to build a home or to design and build a home that is comfortable and valuable, and you want to build better than just the status quo, then Homestar is a way for you to achieve that. So here, without further ado, is my chat with Matthew Cutler. Hey everybody, it's Sharon from Smart Living Spaces here, and I have got Matthew Cutler from the New Zealand Green Building Council with me to explain to all of us all things Homestar and give you a bit of an introduction to the New Zealand Green Building Council. So hi Matt, thanks for coming
Sharon.
on.
Yeah, good to see you.
Awesome. So let's just dive in the deep end a bit, Matt, and explain to people, for a bit of context, who you are and what the New Zealand Green Building Council is, because some people might not have even heard of such a concept.
Sure. The New Zealand Green Building Council this year, 2026, will actually be celebrating our 20th anniversary. So been around for that long, and basically we're an advocacy group, and we provide rating tools for all types of buildings in New Zealand. We're not a council, so we're nothing to do with government, despite our name. We are a membership organisation. We have about 700 members from across the building and construction sector, as well as some other government agencies, builders, developers, and some education institutions, and also products and suppliers who are interested in providing stuff for building homes and buildings as well. So we represent all those people, and they essentially help us do the work of operating a range of rating tools, which are environmental rating tools. So energy, comfort are a big part of those, but we do look at things like water and waste and how healthy and comfortable those buildings are as well.
Brilliant. So you mentioned you do a couple of things like Green Star, Homestar, and HomeFit. The people that I talk to sometimes get confused. Some might not know about HomeFit, but some people get confused with the Green Star and the Homestar. Can you just briefly tell us what the difference is between the three of those?
Yeah, so if you think of a bit of a matrix of commercial buildings, so offices, industrial buildings, warehouses, those sort of things, and then residential buildings, which includes homes and apartment buildings on one side, and then on the other side, you've got existing buildings and then new buildings. And we have different rating tools for buildings in all those different quadrants. So we have some tools like Neighbours, which are predominantly for the energy efficiency of existing office buildings, and then Green Star, which is the sustainability and overall comfort and efficiency of new office buildings mostly, but also some other commercial and non-residential buildings. And then we have Homestar and HomeFit, which are for new homes for Homestar, and then HomeFit, which is a bit more of a DIY or upgrade to existing homes. So it's kind of that split between residential and non-residential, and existing buildings versus brand new buildings.
Fantastic. So just because we are talking about Homestars particularly, so we're talking about new residential dwellings here. So can you just expand a little bit on Homestar and how the system works, and perhaps touch a little bit on the mandatory minimums that you have for performance? Because I think people think if I get a rating, like what's the difference in those ratings, or Is it just a number of points that you get, or is there something else that differentiates them?
Yeah, you've hit on the two main components, which are these mandatory minimums, so things that you just must have in order to achieve Homestar. And then it's a matter of collecting enough points from across a whole bunch of credits in order to move up the scale, starting from 6 and going all the way up to a 10 Homestar. So the point of a lot of our tools is to fill in some of the gaps of the building code, because there are some good things in the building code around structure, making sure the building's going to stay up, it's going to be safe from things like fire. And we have some fairly minimal levels of things like insulation is required. And a lot of people be familiar with insulation is now needed in our building code. It hasn't always been the case, and it's been bumped up over the years. But there's a whole bunch of other stuff. For example, new homes aren't actually required by the building code to have a heat pump. There's also no requirement to look at how hot a building will get. And that's something that we look at quite a lot in Homestar, because it's becoming a really big issue. It's becoming more of an issue. We also have some real deficiencies in the building code, particularly around things like moisture control. So a lot of homes will get condensation in the roof is one of the most common places. But if it's happening inside the roof, it's probably happening elsewhere in places like inside the walls, or in the back cupboard or something. Sometimes it's in areas where you might not be able to see it, might not be obvious, but you might be able to smell it, or you just get that kind of stuffy feeling. And those are areas where the building code is just really inadequate. And what Homestar aims to do is to assist buyers as much as designers and builders to figure out what's missing, and to identify those homes where those problems have been solved and fixed and addressed, so that you can move into them with more confidence that you're going to be healthy and comfortable.
So the way it works is that you would go for some sort of certification process. Like, how does a homeowner have any form of confidence that, say, if they're achieving a Homestar, let's say 8 home, that those improvements that they've made is actually represented in sort of some form of acknowledgement with the home?
Yeah, so we have a process of training industry professionals, Homestar designers, and then assessors, and then we also have an auditing process. So it typically starts as early as possible in the design and build process, where an architect, or if you're a home buyer, you would say, okay, I'd like this home to be Homestar rated. And then they would make sure that it gets modelled either by themselves, or they would find a trained person who knows how to use some of the tools to run the design through an energy model. And that's used to predict the performance. And it will do that for the whole year, which is really important, so that we're not just looking at how comfortable and how much energy will be used in the middle of winter. But as I mentioned before, we're also looking at how comfortable it will be in the summertime, and how much energy it will use to stay warm, and also to keep cool. So that's all done relatively early on, and we have some benchmarks that we've set to say that it must perform under certain levels in order to achieve wherever the target is. You mentioned 8 Homestar, so there'll be certain it's kind of like a fuel efficiency on a car, or what kind of range an EV might have. It's equivalent to that of a home, to say, based on these specifications, the home will stay at this temperature, and it will consume this amount of energy in order to do that. And the higher up the scale you go, it has to use, or show that it's going to use less energy to stay in a comfortable range. So, and just going back to what you previously mentioned, there are 2 components to that. So we have some mandatory minimums of things that just must be included regardless of what you want to do. And they're things like that energy modelling, also a requirement for ventilation. They're the main 2 ones, really, is to make sure you've got good ventilation in there, and they've got a good energy model. And then there's a whole bunch of other points that you need to collect from across the other credits on things like construction waste and the how healthy the materials are, or any third-party certifications that the materials and products that you put inside the house, what those has. So it's quite a comprehensive tool, but there are those key things you've just got to have to make sure it's going to be healthy.
So it covers, from what I'm hearing, it covers quite a broad range of sort of sustainable features. So you're not locked into it, but it locks in some fundamentals that we know about building better.
Yeah. There's a broad range of options, but that doesn't mean it's complex to get a rating, because if you break it down to addressing those fundamental mandatory minimums first, they're the really important ones, and then you've basically got this menu of items that you can choose from in order to collect up further points.
And just for anyone who's listening to this, I'm going to add to Matt's answer, just because I'm a Homestar designer and assessor, and I do know the answer, is that there is a certification process that your project will go through, so that it's not just a professional telling you what your home will do. It's actually the New Zealand Green Building Council checking that and auditing it, and then applying a rating to it. So there is that independent verification, and homeowners can get a plaque that they can put out their front door to say what their home has been rated to. So there is an acknowledgement.
Yep. They can also use that parts of that Homestar rating, particularly around the energy modelling, as part of the compliance. So it's not necessarily an add-on or additional piece of work. It can be used for that compliance, as well as providing lots of other valuable information. And like you said, it's basically a quality assurance check, because quite often our auditors do pick up on things that, for example, gaps in insulation or ventilation ducting that hasn't been connected properly, and that might have been missed by a council inspector who's very busy, and they might not do as thorough a check. So it's quite good to have another person casting their eye independently over the quality of your build.
I am going to jump in here and say that there is a misconception that council inspectors are there to check for quality. They're actually not. They're simply there to check for building consent compliance. So you're quite right, the ducting may be very inefficient, whereas a Homestar auditor might say no, and a Homestar assessor doing the checking on site might say you need to fix that, because that's not going to be efficient. So Homestar has a way of adding that layer of quality control that local councils aren't legally allowed to enforce. They have to just stick to their lane of building consent performance. I'm going to sort of sidestep a little bit and say to you, a lot of people say to me, what's the difference between Homestar and Passive House? Because Passive House still has a certification process too, and you touched on being a part of health and comfort. Just want to speak to that, because some people think it's a swap, it's one or the other, but actually they've got parts that overlap, and then they've got parts that don't.
Yeah, and we do have a couple of certifications that are both. So there are some Passive House certified homes in New Zealand that are also Homestar, and quite often they are very high rated Homestar. So they're typically around a 10, which is the top of the scale, and that's because Passive House does very, very well on all of the credits in Homestar that are to do with health and comfort and energy efficiency, because that is the focus of Passive House. So if you go down that path, either just using a Passive House designer, or if you go all the way to certification, that provides an amazing foundation for achieving a high Homestar rating. And then what you can do is supplement that with all those other credits that I mentioned, and things like water efficiency, upfront carbon, material selections, construction waste, all those things that are additional to, but not necessarily included in the Passive House certification, that help make the home more overall sustainable.
Okay, and just to clarify for somebody who's not quite familiar with this, Passive House is an international voluntary standard, and as Matt says, is to do with health, comfort, and energy efficiency, while New Zealand Green Building Council's Homestar is really focused around New Zealand issues and addressing the New Zealand construction industry where it's at. So you've got climate resilience, etc. And so what other benefits are there for homeowners, apart from the fact that you get a better quality home and you can get sort of independent certification from it? And I mean in terms of performance, finance, and value.
Yeah, well, one of the key ones is access to low interest finance. And more now, it's actually can be more cost effective to do Homestar. It can be more financially beneficial over, I wouldn't even say a long term. It certainly is over a long term, but we're talking in some instances payback periods of less than 3 years or around about 3 years, depending on where you are in the country and what rating you go for. And that's because, as we mentioned, first and foremost, you're going to get a better performing home. You're going to get the quality check, so you're not going to have to retrofit stuff immediately as you move into the house, because things like ventilation and moisture control should be taken care of. And you are going to be supplementing some of the things you have to do anyway, particularly around compliance and all the just general construction costs. But a lot of the banks are coming on board now with things like sustainable finance. So if you're a builder looking at doing more than one house, there's some really attractive options from a whole range of the banks that use things like Homestar as the eligibility criteria for sustainable finance. And we've got instances of builders who are saving hundreds of thousands of dollars on their construction costs over a period of sort of 3 to 5 years on just those interest payments on that construction finance. Then if you're a home buyer and you are looking at a home that's got a Homestar rating on it, it's a brand new home, you can go to ANZ and get either 0.7 or 1% off their advertised rate, depending if you're on a floating or a fixed rate. And that's a significant saving. And the modelling that has been done by Infometrics independently suggests that, depending on where you are, that could save people up to about $90,000 over the life of their mortgage. But I think, that's kind of, those are big numbers because it's over the life of a mortgage, long period of time. I think the most exciting number from that independent research is the fact that it shows that you can actually afford a slightly higher upfront cost to make sure you get the things in your home that you probably expect to be there, things like ventilation. And that's only a few $1,000s extra if it hasn't been accounted for at all. But because of the benefits of the energy efficiency and the lower interest rate, that's going to be paid for in around about 3 years. And that's really exciting because a lot of people think in sort of terms of about 7 to 10 years in terms of payback period that's reasonable for a house.
And also just to add that Homestar ensures that your home is not going to overheat as much as just any old stock standard one. And if last week is anything to go by, we've experienced a pretty warm start to the summer.
Yeah.
Also, I know you put this on social media. We've seen New Zealand's first passive house exceed market expectations when it went onto the market at auction. So there is a sign that building better is starting to be more desirable, and people willing to pay extra money for it.
Yep, there's really good evidence from overseas and as close as Australia where there's a sustainability premium of up to 17% on certain criteria. Just in Australian homes, they're working off a much bigger data set, and people have been recording some of those metrics for a longer period of time. But we don't have that here, all that data, but we're certainly anecdotally seeing that if you get the opportunity to see two very similar houses right next to each other in the same neighbourhood, then some of the questions will start to come around things like, does it have good heating? Does it have cooling? Is it going to be comfortable all year round? Does it have any mold or dampness? And that's starting to translate to, is there some sort of independent measure of quality assurance?
Okay, that's awesome. So you're out and about, always talking to developers, builders, designers, sometimes people in the statutory legislation kind of band. You touch on a broad range of people. What's the general feeling that you get about, what's the receptivity that you get for Homestar currently?
Good. Certainly for people who have used it and been familiar with it, good. There's obviously some skepticism around things like cost, and there are some misconceptions. People assume that sustainability means putting solar panels on the roof and having veggie gardens and those sorts of things. And I really focus on talking about those issues that we've already touched on around fresh air, constant supply of fresh air, keeping the house dry, making sure you don't have condensation issues, and then that it's not going to get too hot. Because those are issues that people know are happening right now, and they are real tangible things that Homestar can help with. Combine that with the finance that's available both for developers and for homeowners, and it's a really compelling offer. I think that the biggest challenge is making people realize that the building code won't look after them as much as it probably should, and as much as what people quite rightly expect it to, because most other things you assume that there's rules and guidelines of when you're a customer that things are going to be fit for purpose, and the building code, unfortunately, in New Zealand is just not fit for purpose. And so many times I hear these stories of people buying a brand new home, and it may be quite a luxury doesn't necessarily mean quality. So it could be a high end, a quote unquote high end home, but they immediately have to retrofit ducted ventilation and 3 heat pumps because it's just so uncomfortable. And that's a $20,000 or $50,000 or more retrofit. So when people complain about, you might have to spend a few $1,000s more on a ventilation system, it actually is much more cost effective to do that early on, and you're going to get a much better result than having to retrofit that into your brand new home and poke holes in your brand new walls.
My next question was, what were the myths, challenges, or excuses that you hear amongst builders, homeowners, and developers and designers? And I'm going to jump in here with two I've heard is, it's a high spec home. We've got nice fittings in there, so it's going to, it's and there's this concept, this perception that value is what it looks like. That's a big one. And the second one is, you talked about continuous ventilation. I just want to let people know that that's continuous ventilation without relying on your doors and windows. So that'll be continuous ventilation with your doors and windows closed, because doors and windows actually don't work as well as what we think they do.
No, and that doesn't mean that you can't use doors and windows, because I'm a big fan. In fact, I'm sitting here, I've got my window open now because it's relatively mild outside. Like a lot of people, I really like sleeping with a window open. I'm a big fan of that, and by requiring continuous mechanical ventilation, we're not saying that you can't have doors and windows open. What we are saying is, as you pointed out, that can't be relied on 100% of the time. And when we do just rely on that, or say that that's adequate, that's when we find that condensation happens, stale air happens. And if you ever monitor, and sometimes some of our people do monitor homes that have that, and you find that things like carbon dioxide, even worse, carbon monoxide, get really, really high, and that can explain sometimes why people wake up with a headache, or just don't get as better sleep as they think they should be getting, or any number of other health or just discomforts in a home that some people get. So that's another big misconception. We find this in passive house as well. People think that a passive house has to be closed up. Totally not true, particularly in our milder climates, where by having a better envelope, and having a ventilation system, it actually means that you can enjoy that beloved indoor-outdoor flow, because it means that when the conditions are right, you throw everything open. But when it's not, you can close things up, and it's not going to take ages to retain, to get back to an equilibrium that's at a really comfortable level. So everything can work together. It's just a question of designing it and building it right.
Excellent. So any other myths, challenges, excuses you've heard some people that...
Yeah, we get quite a few, but I mean, they're the really big ones. Yeah. And I guess the counter to all that is I'm just trying. I guess one of the biggest myths is that the building code is adequate, and that people will be protected as a consumer by this magical thing called the building code. And that's really the biggest myth. And it's a really unfortunate one, because it shouldn't be that way. You know, our CEO often jokes that if the building code was up to snuff, then we wouldn't have a job. And that would kind of be a good situation for consumers and home buyers in New Zealand, because everything should be really healthy and comfortable, but that's just not the case. So until that happens, it's unfortunate that consumers have to do a little bit of extra work, and we try and make that easy by having these rating systems.
Excellent. I've started saying that the building code has the legal mandatory minimums to build a house, because that essentially what a lot of homes and a lot of homes actually just reach is just that mandatory minimum requirement.
It's the legal mandatory minimums to keep the thing up, you know, to make it so it doesn't fall over or easily catch fire. But
yes,
and it's got a little bit better recently at keeping the rain out, because we had a whole bunch of leaky ones. But it honestly doesn't do much more than that. So I would even, and that's why I go back to that whole fit for purpose thing, because yes, it will legally is required to do some fairly basic things, and that's a lot of that's there to protect the builder actually, not necessarily the occupant for the life of that building.
So that's a bit of a downer, but have you got some? But we're going to lift people up now. What are some success stories that you have seen with Homestar?
I mean, any home that gets that rated is a success story. I mean, we get people just really getting it with some of those things that make such a big difference. I guess one of the biggest things that I'm excited about the last few years is our Echo energy modeling tool, which brings what has been quite a complicated process and therefore expensive, and it's brought that into the hands of architects or designers, and even some builders are using it. And it's a really powerful design tool, and I've seen it being used with a client sitting there, helping to not justify, but give consumers the options, because you can sit there and literally change the windows out or change the amount of shading or the size of the eaves, and you can see the results right there and say, look, this is your choice, but look what happens when we tweak this here. This is how it's going to change the performance of your home. And it puts a lot of power either in the designer or the home builder to make those informed decisions about their future home. And it's a way of testing the home, prototyping a home before it's actually built. So that's one of the things I'm really excited about, energy modeling just as a general concept. And we have this Echo tool, which is the energy and carbon calculator for homes, which is developed primarily for Homestar. But that's just one of a whole bunch of them, but it's a really good one because it's very accessible now to much of the industry.
I am going to just drop two projects that some people might want to check out in terms of Homestar, actually three. There's 10 Te Araha Street that you featured at the New Zealand Building Summit. They got a Homestar rating, so that was communal social housing.
Oh, 26 Araha?
26 Araha, that's one.
Here in Auckland, yep. That's that's quite an early adopter, fantastic project, and a really good example of a a co-housing, a shared spaces dropped into an existing suburb.
And that was done by a private developer. And then
It
on the
was.
other side, we have Beta Ventura, which got certified passive house, but also Homestar 7.
Hmm.
So those projects are, albeit larger projects than a standard standalone home. That's just to show some people that's what's possible.
Yep. Another one
So
that I like to showcase is one in Rotorua, the Ferry Springs Road, which is a kind order set of units, and they've done a really great job of showcasing external shading on their windows, and they've made a really great feature out of them. So it's a dark clad building with these bright yellow kind of eyebrows on their windows. We've got a case study of that on their website, and I just really like it because it's embracing this idea of external shading. External shading is really, really effective for summer comfort, and a lot of architects haven't figured out how to do that in a aesthetically pleasing way. So this is a really good example of someone who's leaned into that.
it's not to say that it's impossible. Yes. So you guys do obviously a huge amount of training, but you also do a lot of education. So do you just want to touch on some of the upcoming events that people might want to keep an eye out? I'll put a link in the show notes for the website. So, and also all the resources that you've touched on.
Yeah, so the main one for 2026 is we're going on a bit of a roadshow to talk about energy modeling. We are doing we do a lot of webinars and events throughout the year, but I think that's the main one that's relevant to this conversation. And the idea of that is for people, it's an introduction to energy modeling. So for architects out there who have heard about energy modeling, but haven't done it themselves or want to know more, even builders, anyone from the industry, or developers, potentially even homeowners who want to get into the space. It's aimed at that entry level idea of just the fundamentals of what energy modeling is, how it works, and then we're going to give a few hands-on experience of Echo, the tool, so that people can decide whether it's something that they want to train themselves in, or find an existing consultant who can work with them on their future projects.
Awesome. Now, Matt, you also wear a number of hats. You have your own little podcast. You're on the Passive House Accelerator podcast.
Yep.
So some people might be intrigued about all the stuff that you're talking about and want to come find you. So where can they find you?
Probably, well, the most consistent place is LinkedIn. I tend to keep that updated. I occasionally post and network with people there. My own website is homestylegreen.com, or, as you mentioned, Passive House Accelerator, where I contribute to the Passive House podcast. And of course, you can have a look on the New Zealand Green Building Council at nzgbc.org.nz, and that's got all the information about Homestar as well as all the upcoming training and events.
Absolutely brilliant. Is there anything else you wanted to add before I sign off?
No, I think we've touched on all of it. So yeah, happy to answer any questions if people want to reach out.
Okay, awesome. I will put a link where people can find you on your LinkedIn profile in the show notes. Matt, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Sharon.
So that's all from me today. I will provide a link to the New Zealand Green Building Council's website and all the resources that Matthew touched on in our chat. But I also wanted to extend an invitation to anyone who wants to know more about Homestar. As I mentioned, I am a Homestar designer and assessor with the New Zealand Green Building Council, and I'm really happy to have a chat with you to find a way to integrate Homestar into a project that you might be in the middle of designing, or a project that you might be starting to design, or a project adventure that you're about to start. So what you can do is you can just drop me a DM on the platform that you're viewing this on, or you can hop into my bio and book a 15-minute chat with me at a time that works for you. So I really want you to be able to unlock all the great benefits of Homestar that Matt has touched on in our chat. because let's really make this year the year that we do create healthy, comfortable, affordable homes for everyday people rather than just simply talk about it.